Okay. So I generally start these typing sessions by asking, how many of my typing sessions have you watched before?
I watched a handful of them.
Okay. And how long have you known about typology or cognitive functions?
It's been several years now.
Okay. Cool. Can you tell me about the events of the day yesterday from lunch till when you went to bed as a series of insignificant sequence of events, like I had lunch, then I read this article on Google News, then I watched some TV, like that kind of stuff, or whatever you did.
I had lunch. I was at my friend's house, so I came back here. I think I may have cleaned. I may have taken a nap.
Do you remember what time you went to bed last night?
About midnight.
Do you remember what you were doing right before you went to bed?
Do I remember what?
What you were doing right before you went to bed?
I was watching Netflix.
Do you remember what you were watching?
Yes.
Is it possible I've seen it before?
I was watching Demon Slayer.
Okay. I don't think I've seen that one, but it's the kind of thing I typically do watch. Uh, do you like to watch stuff like that with like magic elements in it and stuff?
Yes.
Okay. You watch those dystopian shows where like only three people survive, or only 3% of the people survive this thing, and then there's this world of usually like teenagers to early 20s people who are a big group of people, and then they kind of get whittled down.
Yes. I like those.
Okay, cool. Um, when you aren't watching YouTube videos about typology, what kind of YouTube videos do you watch?
I watch some travel stuff and mostly how-to videos, things that are informative.
Okay, so how did you know that this is this background thing you have there is part of Google Meet, right?
Yes.
So how did you know about that?
Um, I just clicked on one of the buttons and it took me to the effects.
Were you looking for that?
Well, I was planning to put some kind of background up.
Okay, and is that something? Is it because you always do that when you meet in meeting apps? Do meeting apps usually have something like this?
I'm not sure, but I usually always try to have a clear background, and because I don't have one at the moment, I decided to put something up.
Oh, I see. Okay, cool. Did you see that video the other day where I think it was Peter had that same background up?
Yes. And I knew you were going to ask me that, and it was the first one. So I just clicked on the first one.
I mean, is that what gave you the idea that it might be a functionality here?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Um, 'Cause I didn't even know it existed until I saw Peter doing it. I was like, oh, you're not in a real coffee shop, huh? That's like a background. Okay. Let's see. Okay, well, why don't I ask you some. Well, let me ask you to do some self reporting stuff first and get to know you that way a bit first. Can you tell me about your relationship with task completion?
Um, I usually just make a list of what I need to do, um, several days, even if it's several days ahead of time, and I do it. Try to get as much as I can done.
Do you cross those things off the list?
Yes,
How are you about being consistent with following routines? Like, for example, Rachel does the laundry every Monday. She always does it on Monday.
I don't. I don't really like routine very much.
Okay. Um, what what amount of your time do you think you spend consuming media?
A lot.
Okay. And do you think you're a person who first receives information, first takes action, first reacts, or first determines about?
Determined.
Okay. Um, if you're reading something that's kind of news-like, what kind of article would you be reading?
Probably something business related.
Okay. And do you have a vision for yourself going forward for like 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, or just a general directionality, or are you just comfortable figuring it out as you go?
It's kind of a bit of all of those things.
Okay, so where do you see yourself? What do you think will have changed about you in 10 years?
Probably not much.
Okay. How much do you think you've changed in the last 10 years?
I think I've matured, but I don't think I've necessarily changed as a person.
Okay. Do you have any pets?
I have a cat.
How long have you had the cat for?
I've had him since November.
And how's your experience of pet ownership been?
I like it a lot.
Okay. Do you does the cat sleep with you?
I would like to get there. Right now, he's not. He just tries to bother me whenever he gets into bed with me. So right now, no.
How easily do you fall asleep at night?
Pretty easily.
Do you like to have something playing in the background?
No, not necessarily.
If you had to sacrifice one, darkness or quiet, which would you sacrifice?
Probably darkness.
Okay. Um, what makes you more angry at yourself if you make a social mistake and somebody perceives you as awkward, or if you stub your toe?
If I stub my toe,
Okay. All right. Well, how much, how clearly do you know what you want?
very, very clearly.
Okay. And how clearly do you know how to get it?
I think it's very clearly.
Okay. Um, how are you feeling emotionally right now?
I'm a little nervous, but other than that, I'm fine.
How are you feeling physically right now?
I'm comfortable.
Does the emotion of nervousness have a physical feeling to it?
Yes.
Can you describe it?
It feels like butterflies
Like butterflies are attacking your face?
in my stomach.
Oh, yeah, I kind of guessed that part. But anyway, do people ever call you or say like that you're shy?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are shy?
No.
Okay, well, that's interesting. So why is it that you think? Why is it do you think that people call you shy?
I just don't talk in a lot of social settings, and I guess they expect me to talk, and so because I don't, they automatically assume that I'm shy. But it's just because I'm probably not interested in talking. But if I have something to say, then I will.
Hmm. So do you think instead of talking, you're evaluating what they're saying?
Yes.
And on what grounds would you self-describe yourself as self-describe yourself? Eric, as evaluating them. Like, on what grounds do you think you're evaluating them?
Can you say that again?
On what grounds would you say you're evaluating what the people are saying? Like, what's going to make you go nod your head versus shake your head?
Whether or not I agree.
Okay. And how long does it take you to determine whether you agree?
It doesn't take long.
Okay. Let me ask you some TI questions. Uh, if no if no bananas come from Iceland and I don't come from Iceland, am I necessarily a banana?
No.
If some porcupines eat Thanksgiving dinner and all things that eat Thanksgiving dinner watch football, is it necessarily the case that some porcupines watch football?
Yes.
Okay. Um, can you tell me who my mother's sister's husband's daughter is in relationship to me?
Your cousin?
Yeah, okay. Well, I can already tell you without even verifying with the polar test what type you are. But I will go ahead and through my various typing testing things here to validate both the the testing protocols and the results. So if I am correct about your type in my current instincts, then you will test NE polar, and then it'll be locked down pretty rock solid, and then we can discuss how to continue. Just I can give you other questions too, but anyway, here's some NE tests. So, can you tell me some possible names for my new invention? My new invention is a it's a tennis racket that has on it a a whistling a whistling thing in the grip, so that every time you swing the racket, it goes whew. Okay, so Can you name my invention? Give me multiple names for the marketing department and to sell my invention as.
Venice.
I'm sorry, say again? I didn't catch that.
Venice.
Winnis? Okay. Or whistle tennis? The whistle tennis? That's fine. That's good. Can you come up with any others?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay. So now let's try. Um, okay, let me. Let's say let's do this. Can you give me possible arguments as to why the U.S. should invade and conquer Mexico?
I can, but do I have to make sense?
I mean, not really. They ideally they'd have make a little bit of sense, but
Well, I mean, realistic.
well, no, not very real. I mean, realistically, the answer is we should not do that. So, given that reality, pretending that you are in charge of advocating in favor of doing it nevertheless, what are some possible arguments you might make that you think might be convincing?
More cheap labor.
Okay.
Um, Probably help with like the war on drugs or something.
Greater access to Mexican pinata technologies? You got anything else?
No.
Okay. So that you just tested polar for any as predicted, and that's nice that I can make this prediction and then have you validate it right away. And the reason is it's pretty obvious to me what type you are is in part because you're my supervisee type. So it means that I the supervisor type kind of always has an advantage over the supervisee type, and it's also the supervisee type in part is the type that's the supervisor type is most easy to understand. So you're an ISTP. You're as ISTP as they come. You're a straight up ISTP. You remind me of my student Chloe, who I work with. Although she's a seventh grader, you guys are exactly the same in seventh grade as you are now. So when you say you didn't change much in the last 10 years, you are correct. You didn't change much in the last 10 years. ISTPs are very consistent in their affect because they don't have much to say and they're very logical. So you can test their TI easily and you knock it right out the park. You test 6 slot SE critical parent because what makes you mad at yourself is that you stub your toe. You just jump to that answer right away. Now I could test that against all the other ones and validate that if I wanted to, but you'd probably end up picking that one over most other options, unless I weighted the question unfairly, right? So, additionally, now the one thing that would seem to contradict this idea of you being an ISTP is how easily you answer the question, how you're feeling right now, and whether or not you know what you want and stuff like that. So, can you think of an occasion though when you actually used your feelings to make a decision?
Um, I would say that if I'm trying to make a decision, if the if I do feel something and it's very strong, then I think that decision would indicate that, I mean, that feeling would indicate that I should probably, go with whatever it is I'm feeling.
Yes, well, that's very speculative of you. So, what I'm asking you is if you can remember a time when you said, even though this is illogical, what this person is saying, I'm going to side with them because I want them to be right. They're, and I want this outcome, and logic be damned.
Yes. But I can't really think of any specific instances.
Right. That's the idea. Is that with your eighth slot function is the most unconscious function. So even though you are able to articulate a circumstance in which you would use your introverted feelings to make a decision, you can't come up with any specific instance of it. Whereas even I can, in the polar, can come up with an example of me using my feelings to make a decision instead of my thinking. I can come up with multiple examples, but I can't come up with examples of me taking regular like taking regular action when I should have. I can't think of examples of me talking when I should have taken regular action instead, except for one I can come up with from way a long time ago. But the reason is because for me, SE in the A slot is the most unconscious function. So the point is, I think that resolves for me that your self-reporting about knowing what you want and such is probably correct, but also not inconsistent with 8th slot FI. Because if you were dominant FI, you'd be able to better. You still have the same kind of problem, which is you'd have difficulty distinguishing between instances of using the 8th slot. Like you'd have difficulty recalling instances of using it because you're so by default. Like whenever you encounter a given person saying things, like what you're doing right now in evaluating what I'm saying, is you're evaluating whether it makes any sense, whether it's logical, and you may have had a type in mind when you came into the typing session. You may have emotional things associated with that, but it's very unlikely that they would let you influence your ultimate decision making about what you think about this typing session. So can you now tell me what you thought you were coming in, and then we can discuss how to use. We still have like 40 minutes left.
Well, I definitely thought that I was some kind of introverted, intuitive.
Okay.
I know I was introverted, but I just assumed that I was also intuitive.
Well, the thing is, ISTPs have NI as their third slot function. Your first, fifth, third, and seventh are your absolute values, and your first and third are your conscious absolute values. So ISTPs have excellent NI. You have good clarity about what holistic truth should guide your way. It's fairly selfish NI, in the sense that it's NI that you when it's consistent with TI rather than NI when it's inconsistent with TI, which limits the amount of NI that you incorporate because you like things to be reducible. But yeah, it makes sense that you'd identify as introvertedly intuitive, because it's just as it would make sense for anybody to look at me and say, well, that guy's got a lot of FE. I do, because it's my third slot function. And it's not bad because it's my third slot function, and it plays a large role in my life. But I'm not a feeler.
So how would an I present itself in an ISTP?
Well, it presents itself as having one clear response to the tennis question, as having, one or maybe two clear best answers to a given question and not being able to, or intentionally habituated at all to, generating randomness. So generating randomness is the extroverted intuition function, and I guess multiple possibilities and stuff like that, right? So Ni then in the third slot is equivalent to Ne in the seventh slot, which is to say the intuition you're always going to consciously use is introverted. And it's probably not until rather later in life that you'll meaningfully include extroverted intuition as an absolute value of the self. Although you'll still take value in it outside of you, in the media you consume, stuff like that. Did you think you were an INTJ? Did you think you were an INFJ?
I've always considered it, but I was never 100% sure. I wanted outside opinion.
INFJ would not be a bad mistyping of you at all, except INFJs are not as TI robust as you are, and they're not as SI robust. So, in other words, you've got not a terrible relationship with SI in your own life. You don't have a lot of issues with sleeping enough, or being able to sleep and stuff like that, and you probably don't have to attend to it consciously as that much. When you do, it's annoying, like when you stub your toe. But INFJs have the same relationship with introverted sensing as you do with introverted feeling, which is very unconscious for them. It's more conscious for you, and they just wouldn't be able to answer those TI questions like you did. Not that quick, not that right on point. That's just too TI robust for an INFJ. So it's like you've got, what you're getting here is kind of a mixed bag in terms of sexiness, because NIDOMs are considered like the sexiest types, right? Like INTJ and INFJ. But it's also the case that a lot of people want to be TI DOMs and or TI tool users and aren't, and they think themselves to be very logical and quote unquote smart, because people conflate TI with smart, but they're not that. They're just not that robust at it, right? And so it's like when I do type INFJs, one of the things that kind of bothers them is they're not as TI robust as you are. So you get kind of a mixed bag in terms of typology sexiness. You get to be a TI DOM, which a lot of people are like to say they're INTPs for some reason, even though INTPs can't do anything. So it's like, I don't know why people think they're such a sexy type, because they just sort of like wallow in their neuroses indefinitely, unless they are a particularly optimal one, So so you get to claim to be in the most deliberatively robust type, which is say a TI DOM, but your intuition's in the third slot, not in the second or the first.
I mean, because I don't have too much of an emotional attachment to, a particular type.
Well, the key thing about both ISFPs and ISTPs is they're pretty easy for me to type, because they both have the same quality of, when I ask you a question, you give me an answer and then you stop. So when people say you're shy, they're wrong. You're not shy. It's just you have the conversational momentum of a rock. So I push, you fall over this one. And then I ask another question, you go with one more answer. That's like classic textbook any polar. And so and also it's like, I would guess that if somebody surprises you with what they say, which probably doesn't happen a whole hell of a lot, because after all, you're a TI DOM, so you've been kind of parsing out shit for a long time, and you've encountered things people say. But if somebody does surprise you with a question that links to some kind of logical argument, you'll probably pause for a long time and or walk away and come back to answer. Do you find that to be the case?
Um, I think I'll usually have something to say
Okay.
if they're if it doesn't make sense, or if I maybe want to correct whatever they said or build upon it or something.
Okay. Um, when you talk about reading about business stuff, do you have plans to do some kind of business endeavor?
Yes. But I just also find the mechanics of it interesting.
Hmm. Yeah, that would make sense. It's a very STP kind of thing to be interested in. Uh, have you like have you found it pretty easy to succeed, like in school and stuff, prior to adulthood?
I would say no. Um, no.
What did you find challenging about it?
I think I had a lot of issues going on at home that influenced how I did it in school.
Okay, so it wasn't so much the schoolwork itself.
Right.
Okay, cool. Did you find it difficult to write papers?
No.
Okay. Did you find it difficult to do math stuff?
So I was actually when things would speed up in math class, I would start my grade would start going down, and so they would put me in a remedial math class where everything was slower, and then I was able to get perfect grades.
Okay. And what did you think about that?
Um, I don't really have any thoughts on it. I actually like math now. It's kind of like side hobby that I'm interested in.
The school system really fucked up your education.
Yeah.
Okay. So, so you find life easier now than it was then?
Yes. Well, I'd say yes. I'm getting there.
Okay. And what do you think the key elements of circumstance for you to change are that best enable you to be happy?
I think it's more so something internal, um, just kind of organizing myself, um, so I can kind of meet the demands of the outside world. Um, but I don't think that I would ever really be able to. I think that's another one of the reasons I thought I was intuitive, because I have a hard time with just being out in the world, and all of the sensory incoming sensory information.
Okay. Well, you don't really describe your relationship with task completion as most intuitives would. It's not. Intuitives typically have some kind of difficulty because to be an intuitive means you have intuition above sensing. And so intuitives have either difficulty with following through on things, completing things, or concretizing their ideas. It's implicit to being an intuitive. Whereas when it comes to task completion for you, if you've got stuff to do, you make a list, you check it off, and you get it done. And that's a sort of straightforward approach towards concretization that you'd expect to see if sensing's above intuition.
Right. Um, I think maybe I was just trying to give you a straightforward answer, kind of. I mean, that's essentially what I do, but not everything always gets done.
I'm not sure. The thing is, like, for an ENTP, I have this horrible relationship with task completion, whereas as soon as I say I'm going to do something, the likelihood of me doing that thing goes down. So I have to sort of just end up doing things before I think about it, or else I don't do anything. Right? The kind of things I am able to do are SI things, which is like this I have on my calendar. So this is involved SIFI. I have to remember that I have this appointment and I go to that, or else SIFE, or else I'm going to be embarrassed and make a big FE mistake, and also it'll be like a TE problem, and so I just got to do it.
Mhm.
So those kind of things I have no problem following through on, because that's SI, and it's my SI may not be very strong, but it's strong enough to do that. It's like I keep track of shit that I have to do, and I do it. But it's the discretionary time that I have no idea what to do with. So it's
Mhm.
like I don't know what I'm going to do after this. I have no idea. If I could speculate about some things I might do after this, but what Rachel and I'll have to eat at some point, I guess, and then I don't know what we're gonna. It's such a baffling question because a slot SE. I don't think it's nearly as baffling a question for you, but let me ask it. What do you think you're going to do after this?
Um, I'll probably have to look at my list and then I'll pick something off of there. But for me, I just found that kind of stripping away all of the things that I would like to do, that I want to do, and just focusing on a few things is just my approach to trying to get things done. And maybe not taking on so much.
Yeah, that's very NI third. It's consistent with your absolute. It's your scorecard, so it's like it probably feels satisfying when you narrow down like a chaotic mess of choice into a singular directionality, and it fits into a larger frame of reference that has some sort of purpose. Then you're hitting on your NI third, your TE fifth. If it's also whatever it is you're doing, or saying anyway, is based on sort of logically defensible positions, then it's also validated on your TI first. And then lastly is if it's if it's new or interesting or creative or something as well, then you hit the jackpot and you validate on all four things. Most people, most of the time, only validate on three. And then occasionally, depending on the moment, you might hit the fourth one. But it's like, when for me, hitting my fourth one, it's like when when I make someone I care about feel good with some like joke or something that's very creative and that has a lot of universal pop, and the person I'm making feel good is someone I actually care about, then it's like hitting the jackpot. That's my four absolute values. For you, it's being logical, being effective, being singularly true, and being creative.
That sounds true.
So we still have a good 20 minutes left. Would you like to direct this conversation? Do you have questions you'd like to ask, or would you want me to explain stuff about ISTPs, or what?
Sure. I'd like to hear more.
Okay, so ISTP is beta quadra, which means they're the NITI types, which you might call the most universal epistemologies, the ones that have both of their epistemological functions, their knowledge function and their deciding function, are both about communication in the external world and not about your own subjective stuff. So, in that regard, your least subjective types are INFJs and ISTPs. Those two types are the least subjective because they have as absolute values all objective things, like or all external things, N's the T's. So, I mean, a TE is a subjectively is the subjective interface function, but both the interface functions have an objective element. So, anyway, regardless, as deliberators, they determine whether something, particularly language, is defensible or not. So most of the time, ISTPs, as they read things, are probably going to conclude bullshit, 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 okay, bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. And that's if they're reading things that are making claims. They're saying, this is so because of this, and yada yada. Then that's when they're going to be prone to calling bullshit. On the other hand, not everything in life is an argument. So on the other fifth slot, external validating absolute value, you've got TE. And this explains why you like reading stuff about business and such, and you like the mechanics of it, because that's a purposeful TE kind of mechanics, which is to say it's structured the way it is for effectiveness, not for being logically sound, except insofar as it's logically sound as a means of accomplishing your bottom line, right? And then in your third slot, NI expresses, as we discussed, as a singularity kind of thing, where it identifies the most relevant thing, or the salient factor, or the determinant factor in a given matter. So, for example, if I came back from giving a speech and I said my speech didn't go well, and I don't know why. I wonder if it's that my shoes were untied, if my timing was a little off on the joke, if my zipper's down, or maybe it's this giant piece of broccoli on my face. Well, obviously it's one of those and not the other ones. It's the giant piece of broccoli on your face that caused people to look at you weird, not those other things that might, in theory, cause people to look at you weird, but weren't responsible in this instance. That's knowing what's the salient or determinant factor and which things get lost in the mix. So, for you, you're also your scorecard. So when you are able to come to a singular certainty about things because of both holistic reasons, that is to say, it's just generally kind of true, including dynamic reasons, and also for reducible reasons, which is to say, I can explain to you why you're an ISTP because you tested NE polar, and you tested TI DOM, and you tested SE6, and I can show how these various questions have linked in the past to these same kind of attentional relationships and stuff. So it's defensible on both grounds. So this is going to be a satisfying conclusion for you to know and have it defensively argued that you are this type. And then the fourth slot, this is going to be an area where you'd like to delegate, so to speak, is FE. You know that you are not actually shy, and yet people tend to maybe say you're shy, but you don't want to have to deal with managing their perceptions. That sounds like a hassle and something that you'd rather not have to deal with. You don't want to have to go into circumstances that require a lot of glad handing, like, hey, how you doing? Good to see you. Nice to see you too. Oh my God, it's been so long. You don't like situations that require much of that. And to the extent that that's required, you'd like to delegate it to some other person in your life that's willing to handle that kind of stuff for you. On the other hand, you probably do enjoy and get a certain amount of satisfaction from simply getting your strengths or virtues or positive qualities affirmed by others in a natural and honest way when that occurs. So in that regard, the fourth slot's kind of a weird kind of like conflicted value in that in real time you can find it very satisfying, but in a larger sense you find it a burden mostly. Now let's go across to eighths now from fourth, which is to say the other half of being fourth slot FE, it means being 8 slot FI, which is, like I said, your most unconscious function. So, because of your, like, I kind of like, this thing again, relationship with FE, it being conscious, it means that what you actually want is kind of on autopilot, which is to say you want to not have to do that. But that also means that you're not really wanting something consciously specifically. You're knowing what you don't want, which is a different kind of matter. And then your blind spot expert intuition expresses as not being able to come up with a lot of possible examples or random things. Asking the question, well, does it have to make sense or does it have to be good before throwing out ideas? Brainstorming, as they say, is not in your wheelhouse at all. In fact, when they say, well, let's just come up with random shit, you're like, well, why? Shouldn't we just come up with the best idea? And then SI in the 6 comes out as a critical parent. You get frustrated at yourself when SI things get in the way. So if you make an SI mistake, which means stub your toe or stay up too late and have to get up in like 3 hours and then be hating it in the morning or something, then you get mad at yourself because you think you should be able to handle all that shit without problems. Like for me, with the 6 slot TE, I get mad at myself when I pick something up and I'm going to carry it across the room and I realize, oh shit, I've carried this part, then I needed to move these things out of the way first. I should have moved those out of the way first. That kind of thing makes me really mad at myself because that's TE getting in my way. I didn't account for ordinalities enough. The same thing with you and SI, introverted sensing. When your body's not, when your biological self isn't working fine on autopilot, you get irritated. When you get sick or when you have some kind of injury or when or somebody else too. Like if somebody else, you go on a hike with somebody and they don't bring any water and then they're complaining about being thirsty and needing to rest all the time, you're just going to be like, okay, you're annoying. And then in the 5th slot is TE, which brings us back up to the fact that your absolute values are thinking on both capacities, which is to say, you're not necessarily very good at consciously or willfully being efficient at things, because you're consciously and willfully being logical instead, which is mostly negationary, whereas efficiency is mostly affirmational. But something has to be useful for you to give it any value in the external world. If someone or something fails to validate at least as a little bit useful, they'll get a failing grade from you, and so it's like too much anti-utility stuff will turn you off of a given person or a given thing. So that's your stack. And I guess I would say that the path to actualization or optimization or whatever lies in structuring your own attention such that when you're being logical, it serves some purpose of being efficient towards attaining on a singular path that's original and deviates from expectations enough to make it pop.
Well, yeah, but that sounds correct.
Okay.
About me.
Do you have any questions, concerns, complaints, queries, quandaries, conundrums?
No.
Okay, so you want me to just stop recording at this point? Do you want me to share this with you privately, or are you comfortable with me publishing?
You can publish it.
Alright, cool. So I'll stop recording then, and I will publish it as soon as we're done here.